Welcome to Living Well with MS, the podcast from Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity, celebrating its 10th year of serving the MS community. I'm your host, Jeff Alex. The goal of our organisation and this podcast is to inform, support and empower people with MS to lead full and happy lives. We're excited you could join us for this new episode. Make sure to check out this episode's show notes for more information and useful links. You can find these on our website at overcomingms.org/podcast or on whichever podcast platform you use to tune into our programme. If you enjoy the show, please spread the word about us on your social media channels or leave a review wherever you tune into our podcast. Have questions or ideas to share? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org, or you can reach out to me directly on Twitter @JeffAlex. We'd love to hear from you. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to Living Well with MS on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And now, let's meet our guest for this episode. Welcome to the latest edition of the Living Well with MS podcast. Joining me on this edition is Kathy Chester. Kathy is both the host of the Move It or Lose It podcast, as well as being a certified fitness trainer for individuals, for groups, for prenatal fitness training, as well as an MS fitness trainer as well. And Kathy actually has both MS and rheumatoid arthritis, so she brings a great deal of insight into this area, and it's great to have her on the podcast. So, welcome to the programme, Kathy, and thank you very much for joining us on the Living Well with MS podcast. So you're a pretty dynamic member of the MS community, from being a podcast host to fitness program guru. But before we talk about all of that, I wanted to discuss a bit about how you got to where you are today. So could you tell us a bit about yourself and where you're from and so on?
Sure. So my name is Kathy Chester, and I'm from Royal Oak, Michigan, nowhere near you. We are very, very, very far apart. So I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in my early 20s. And before the MS diagnosis, I was actually diagnosed with RA. And
so that's rheumatoid arthritis.
Yes, rheumatoid arthritis. And so throughout my diagnosis, so young, I never understood when we got the glossy pamphlets and we're told, choose. And that was confusing to me. Also, what on earth, when you're that young, is multiple sclerosis, right? No one knew what it was. And the idea that you would just go to bed, rest, and that didn't make sense to my brain. I was always coaching. I was into a lot of athletics. I was always very much on the go. So knowing what I knew about that, I didn't understand how your body would not atrophy if you are just lying down and sitting all the time. So it didn't make sense to me. So I kind of thought, this is rubbish. I'm going to run this disease out. So I started doing some workouts and things like that. Nothing that was safe for MS, by the way. In the 90s, we didn't know anything like that. So I started to do some things. And then as the MS changed and as I grew in my knowledge and more certifications, then I was able to understand what moves for us that needed to be done to strengthen our bodies, our legs, the foot drop, keeping the MS hug away, things like that. So I started working with the MS and the autoimmune world.
And I believe you had optic neuritis as one of your symptoms.
Yes.
And it is quite a common symptom, isn't it? There's a lot of people, but I think because it's so obviously not something else. Like this. I mean, I don't know with you, but I had a lot of things that my doctor said, oh no, that's, things that came in and they went away and they went, oh, that's fine now. And it's like, and then, but the vision thing, it was like, okay, the optician's saying there's nothing wrong with my eyes.
Yes.
So there's something else. He said there's something wrong.
Really?
Outside your eyes, because the optician was only looking at, he goes, all I look at is inside the eyes. Nothing wrong with your eyes at all. But clearly there is something wrong.
Right.
So you need to actually go to a neurologist because there's something wrong with the brain getting the signals from the eyes.
Right. So
I think it's one of those things. So, I mean, does that inform the work you do with your podcast and fitness program?
Definitely. So that was, like you said, so they were tingling. There was numbness in my hands, my feet, my legs in the beginning. And I would chalk it up to, oh, I probably did this too much, or who's going to think MS? That never even entered my mind. But what finally brought me, and plus I'd already had the RA diagnosis, which was definitely there, but the MS was missed. So what really finally was the nail in the coffin was losing my eyesight. It's always on a holiday. I never understand that one, but it was losing my eyesight on Mother's Day. So the next day I went to see an ophthalmologist, and he was just the nicest man and young, and just looked at me and said, he found the optic neuritis, and then sent me from there, asked me about other symptoms that I had. And I thought, he's living in my house. How does he know this? So he knew about kind of the numbing and stuff like that. Sent me to a neurologist at the hospital. Started, because what did we do back then? We did steroid infusions. So I started on those, and then it went from there. So through that, I think the empathy and going to crazy support groups. I went to a support group actually in a scooter shop, my first one in my 20s. I was like, this is depressing as I can imagine. So that really started my empathy and wanting to work more with. I started doing a lot of new patient. So I would be in getting my infusion, and they would ask me, are you feeling well enough to talk with a new patient that was diagnosed? So that became something I really enjoyed, hence the things I do now.
And so I don't know how much you know about overcoming MS, but it's based on sort of scientific research for lifestyle interventions,
yes,
as well as medication. So it's not
right.
It's not saying don't take medication, but it's also saying that there's a part to play in. I mean, you've mentioned exercise, but also
yes,
diet, lifestyle. Those
100%.
have an effect. So, how did you sort of come to understand that these factors affected you? I mean, was it sort of almost like personal experimentation and trying things out?
100%. Especially back then, because back then, if you remember, they would always say there is no diet. Food does not affect you. Again, that didn't make any sense to me. So, because I realized that, wait, when I eat this, I feel worse. When I eat this, I don't feel as well. And I always, because of my background, had a pretty good diet as far as the vegetables and things like that. But I didn't understand gluten. I didn't understand that I need to stay away from all dairy. So there were things that I didn't really understand. So I think learning more now, and the philosophy that you guys go by, which I know very well, it tends to lean itself much more what I believe. So that's really where I'm at.
I find that, I mean, so I was diagnosed in, I think, 2016. But my dad had MS, so I'm kind of aware. I mean, he actually died in 1998.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And it was, you don't die of MS, do you? But they said, yeah, but he probably wouldn't have died if he didn't have it because of complication. But yeah, he was very much the same. Yeah, there was no diet. He wasn't encouraged to do more exercise. There were no real medication. There wasn't really much, was there?
Right.
I mean, he was very much aware that stress had a factor, but
yes,
there was certainly nothing like we have nowadays. And the amount of different medications on the market is huge, and much more understanding. I think that is starting. Sort of this healthy diet and lifestyle is starting to almost get to the edge of being advised to people. It's sort of getting there.
100%.
So yes,
I think then it allows you to then get rid of a lot of the medications we're thrown at us, right?
Yeah.
You go and it's like, here's a new one, here's another one. So it allows us, because of the eating better and the philosophy that I know you go by, that I personally believe in, is it allows for us to feel all of a sudden better. And then you realize, oh, wow, this played a lot into why I was feeling so bad and why I wasn't sleeping, why I wasn't able to function the way I can now.
Yeah, I find the dairy a really fascinating one, because that's one I think will be really resisted for them to officially say, because it's still in this country an official food group.
Yes.
is dairy. And it was only when someone said, but it can't be normal to have breast milk as an adult. And it really can't be normal to have breast milk as an adult from another species. That can't be like, we didn't evolve to do that.
Exactly.
And then you think, yeah, that is really weird when you think about it.
And I hear that. I get that a lot with my clients that I train. It's almost like a bargaining, like, well, what if I just do cheese? And like, nah. So there is a bar, and I get it because we have it. So we get it. There are things that we love, but if you want to feel good, it's a trade-off.
Yeah. I did used to like cheese, but I wouldn't. So, now it is difficult in this country because we have our cup of tea, and a cup of tea got to have milk in it, and so now I've switched to coffee. Works much better with like oat milk and things. So I've kind of switched away.
For sure.
For someone in England, that's a big thing. Tea is a big thing.
Yeah, for sure. I was like, you don't drink tea? Yeah. Isn't that a sin?
Well, yeah. Speaking about your fitness program, so you're the creator of Disrupt, Move and Transform, a specialized fitness training program delivered online for people with MS and other autoimmune conditions, I believe.
Yes.
So could you tell us a bit about the program and how you started and how it came to be?
Yes, 100%. So what I found is that as I looked more and more into what was provided for us, when we wanted a program, what I found a lot of were big programs. And what would happen is you'd be sent a video, right? So when we have MS, we can't do certain things, right? We either cannot get out of the chair, or if our feet are turned weird ways. We can't come down and sit down properly. So the idea to me of handing someone a video with multiple sclerosis and saying, do this, and no one watching them, it made no sense to me. I could not understand that. So I needed to come up with a program, and I'm still in the midst of promoting it and trying to get, people to understand this, is that, no, I'm with you. I don't leave you. I'm here the whole time. And if I see your foot turned a different way, or you're starting to lead, a lot of times when we exercise and you're watching a video, you're trying to do the same thing they're doing. So let's say you've got a band and you're doing a shoulder press. You're not understanding that the weaker arm is here still, and you're taking the stronger arm and you're doing this, right? So I'm able to watch and say, stop. We're going to stay where the weaker arm is until this gets stronger. And that stronger arm is not going to go up any higher. We're going to wait, and we're going to keep working with this arm. So those are things, again, I would say you can't teach it unless you have it, right? We know it because we have it. So I'm better able to catch those things and work with them. So I not just do the one-on-one, but I also do it via Zoom in a sense where there could be 7 to 10 people, and I'm showing seated moves and standing moves, and able to watch and say, hold on, stop that. Let's do this instead. So I can watch, always asking, is it cool enough where you are? Do you have water? And I think that's the personal touch that I'm able to give rather than throwing a video.
So it's online, but it's in person, if you like, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And there
Our new world.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. Everyone is like this. No, yeah.
And I do have patients that come into the studio that live near me as well.
And just to mention, there are loads of links to Kathy's offerings and also the podcast in the show notes. So do check out the show notes because there's links to everything there. So before you moved focus to Disrupt, Move and Transform, you're a successful fitness trainer, and you actually took a step back financially to serve the MS community and other autoimmune conditions. So how did you and why did you make the choice to risk sort of known like financial income to jump into an unknown market?
Well, fortunately, we had a little chance to get to know each other and chat before. It was really, like I had said, right before COVID stopped, right before it started, we had realized that we were finally at a point, growth enough, that investors were wanting to do a second gym. And all I can say is it terrified me, because with my disease progressing a bit and my autoimmune, my MS clients already trying to fit them in and not having the space in the room, when COVID happened, I was able to really, what we all quieted down, we had to. So I was able to sit back and really think about, what do I want to do that's going to make an impact, and what feels good, and what can I do for the MS community? And so speaking to my husband and taking a huge financial loss, but this feels good. This feels so much better. When you're done with what I do and I get a phone call or a text that says, I stood in the shower for the first time, I still cry. I still get weepy. It's just I can't explain enough the reward in that.
Yeah, it's a bit different to just saying I can
Yes.
bench press this much weight or something.
You're like,
It's
good job.
Yeah. I've actually making
Right.
people's lives better. So
Right.
yeah. If people want to learn more about disrupt, move, and transform, I'm getting that right, isn't it? Disrupt, move, and transform. Yeah. Disrupt, move, and transform. What's the process of getting involved and contacting you and so on?
So all they have to do is go onto the website, which is Move It or Lose It podcast.com. So if they go onto that, they will see all this whole structure of what that is. And they are always welcome to DM me. And that is just my, on Instagram, it's MS Move It or Lose It. And they can always DM me, ask me questions. I've done lots of phone calls with different clients to really explain it. As you know, cognitively, we can forget things quickly. So I like to be able to really explain it so that there's an understanding. So if it's a phone call that they need and DM me after an email, 100%, that's always welcome.
So you've mentioned a bit there about the podcast. The Move It or Lose It podcast is now in its second season. So could you tell us a bit about your podcast and why you decided to start a podcast?
Well, I'm going to have you on it soon, but no. So what I did is I wanted to do a podcast for a long time. Again, the gym took so much of me. And so what I did is I listened to several different podcasts for years and trying to get my idea of what I wanted it to be, more conversational. And what I really decided is I wanted my guest with the autoimmune disease, a lot of them are MS, and then to get something that is inspirational, something that they do, and then have a doctor come on and really talk about the issue. So for example, I'm going to be talking about cannabis and MS. So I have a patient that is using cannabis and how it works for them. And then I'll have a doctor who will then discuss it as well. So that we really have that more conversational, like what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And then I'll have a doctor that will then talk to me about the effects of it and how does it help with spasticity. And are we to drink a gallon of CBD? Because we hear that and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So it's just really, that's kind of how I started doing it. So I'm enjoying it tremendously.
Yeah, I mean, I personally find I just learned so much as well.
Yes.
I've recently interviewed Misha or Mikhail, he was called the who was cannabis doctor.
Yes.
Maybe the same
we're
guy.
going to discuss about that after.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating actually in this country because we have a very old-fashioned approach to it where you can't even really get medical cannabis. It's
right.
It's pretty much, and yeah. Which you think
my clients will say, mail it to me. I'm like, I'm going to go to prison.
Well, yeah, no. Well, no, I was told this in because I do a lot of work in Seattle, and I was told there, they said, oh, you'd be able to take this back with you because you've got MS. And I said, no, I wouldn't. It's not like that. So hopefully things might be moving. But anyway.
Yes.
So as another thing that came out of the podcast is you have a group called Women Who Disrupt MS. So
yes.
How did that start up and what are the goals of that group?
So what happened during this is that during COVID, as we talked about, you really became connected to a lot of us who had MS. I think it was a time because we were shut down that we really connected. And in that, I found a lot, especially through the podcast, I've done it with men. So I've been in men's groups where I've worked with just the men. And I found a large group of women, newly diagnosed, and women who've been diagnosed for 30 years. I have a woman who does the group with me, and we do this every third Wednesday. And we really just sit down. And I'll tell you, I'm absolutely stunned by the amount of women that are in this group, but the newly diagnosed is stunning to me. And their openness, but there's still the fact that we are still in the same issues, like the workplace stuff. We could talk then about food, but still that's been a very rewarding thing to be able to have these women come on. We've developed a Facebook group that's private that they can discuss things and really trying to keep it encouraging. So as you know, sometimes you've always got that one person that will take over, and so you got to kind of kindly moderate and say, well, now we're going to give this person a chance to chat. So really keeping the topics that are very on the forefront of the movement in MS. Like the next one's going to be about the workforce. And as we're working, when is it the time to tell your employer? When is it the time to tell your coworkers? Things like that.
And so if people are interested in joining Women Who Disrupt MS, how would they go about that? Is it all available at the same place? Or?
No. So what we did with this is, again, they're welcome to DM me and what we do is we collect email. Once we have your email, you're immediately sent a link the day before so that you have it. And also it works as a reminder. Again, we need reminders, alarms on everything, right? So it works as a reminder too, once we have the email. So we can then send an email as a reminder. And we also promote it on Instagram and Facebook so that the clients, the patients can see it, the women can see and say, oh yeah, don't forget this. So that's, again, welcome. DM me is the best way. And then I can get your email and we go from there.
Okay. So this is sort of a multi topic podcast is actually so there's multiple reasons people might want to check you out. So it could be that it's the Women Who Disrupt MS group. It could be they're interested in listening to the podcast.
Just DM me and email me.
Or it could be that they're interested in your fitness programs. So I'd like to thank you very much for being a guest. I mean, I would definitely encourage people to have a look at the show notes because it might be that it's the Disrupt, Move and Transform. It might be that they're interested in your podcast. It might be the Women Who Disrupt MS group. So yeah, have a look at all the show notes for all the amazing stuff that you're doing, and there's links, there's information in there to get more information about you. And I'd like to thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find all sorts of useful links and bonus information there. Do you have questions about this episode or ideas about future ones? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org. We'd love to hear from you. You can also subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Living Well with MS is kindly supported by a grant from the Happy Charitable Trust. If you'd like to support the Overcoming MS charity and help keep our podcast advertising free, you can donate online at overcomingms.org/donate. To learn more about Overcoming MS and its array of free content and programs, including webinars, recipes, exercise guides, OMS circles, our global network of community support groups, and more, please visit our website at overcomingms.org. While you're there, don't forget to register for our monthly e-newsletter so you can stay informed about the podcast and other news and updates from Overcoming MS. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time. The Living Well with MS family of podcasts is for private, non-commercial use and exists to educate and inspire our community of listeners. We do not offer medical advice. For medical advice, please contact your doctor or other licensed healthcare professional. Our guests are carefully selected, but all opinions they express are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Overcoming MS charity, its affiliates, or staff.